Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our online webinar on European innovation ecosystems. Next slide, please. So my name is Laura Varisco. I am one of the thematic experts of the Interreg Europe Policy Learning Platform. And today with me, I'm happy to introduce you Mark Pattinson. Hi, Mark.
Good morning, Laura. Good morning, everyone.
And Eugénie Suplisson, that will assist us with the technical support. Next slide, thank you. And I'm also happy to have with us some interesting speakers. So hello, Rafał Mujakowski from Poland. And also Albert Hahn from the Netherlands. Hello, Albert.
Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for being with us today. You can. So, if you're here today, is because you may know or you may be interested in the Interreg Europe program. Interreg Europe is an interregional cooperation program involving 29 countries, but we had a nice news from the monitoring committee of last week. So we are welcoming 7 new countries in the program. So namely Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Moldova, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Serbia, and Ukraine. And the program covers all the topics and the policy objectives of the European cohesion policy. So Interreg Europe objective is to improve regional development policies, and how Interreg Europe program is actually primarily dedicated to policy makers. And so if you are a policymaker and you would like to improve your policy, regional policies, you can have access to the program through exchange of experience. And the program covers 2 actions. So you can pass to the next slide. So the program can help you funding interregional cooperation projects. In this new programming period, 2 calls have been opened. The first call closed last year, and 72 projects have been approved. And the second call closed on Friday, 9th of June, and we received 145 proposals. And then here we are. So the second action of the program is the policy learning platform, which is the capitalization strand of the program. And so if you are a policymaker and you would like to tackle your policy challenge, the policy learning platform is actually meant for you. And what can we offer? We offer a several variety of tailor-made services. So you can have access to knowledge. Next slide. We have a database of validated good practices from our thematic experts, and you can also have access to a variety of written support materials, such as our policy briefs. Moreover, you can have access to people. We have a community of more than 25,000 practitioners all over Europe, and you can meet them during our networking and policy learning events that can be online, like this one, but also on site. And we had a nice workshop at the beginning of June in Ghent. And last but not least, you can have access to expert support. And I'm happy to present you our top service, which is the peer review. The peer review is 2 days dedicated to your policy challenge, and you can have access to some valuable peers from all over Europe that will be there to help you tackling your policy challenge. I remind you that the call for expression of interest to benefit from this service is always open, and you can submit your request on our website. Moreover, we organize also matchmaking sessions that are a small scale of version of the peer review. They last 2 hours, and last but not least, you can still have access to the policy help desk service, and you can submit your request on our website, and our thematic experts will be happy to help you. So now these are some examples of our services related to the topic that we are tackling today. So we will see some good practices from the Cohesion and Track S3 projects. As concerning our policy brief, we wrote an interesting policy brief on smart specialization strategy. And also we had a peer review for the Western Greece Managing Authority on how to improve their S3 governance, and also a workshop in Bern, Czech Republic on regional innovation ecosystems. So I'm happy now to leave the floor to our thematic expert, Mark Pattinson, who will be our keynote speaker for today's session. Please, Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Laura. Again, welcome from me. Today's webinar is a bit different from the usual formats, because we don't normally go in such detail on new calls. But given the focus of the regional innovation valleys and the I3 calls on interregional cooperation and the strong links with the Interreg Europe community and projects, we thought it was useful to share some insights from our perspective, but also share some insights from the community, demonstrating how your projects can also contribute to constructing interesting partnerships to bid for these calls. So the next few slides, and you can move on to the next one, are based on not reinventing the wheel, but the Info Day call that ISMEA, the agency responsible for piloting both calls, took place on May the 25th. Obviously, you always get these slides after the presentation, and the links, touch wood, always work, and you can get access to the full set on the I3 calls from the Info Day. But we will share some of what we see as the key points, in particular on the Regional Innovation Valley. And just to remind you, those who are interested on board in their summer holidays, you've got until the 17th of October. So the first thing is to really consider this as part of a package. There's been lots of publicity, lots of interesting information, but here we see the DG Regio cohesion policies working alongside the research and innovation priorities of DG Research, combining their knowledge and their networks within, let's call it branding, or the regional innovation valleys. So there are two paths. One is going towards the I3 calls, the interregional innovation investments. This is the third call in that program. So some of you will already be familiar with the I3. And it would be interesting if in the chat, those who have participated or in a partnership, you could just say so. Like that, we can come back to you later in the moderated session. So anyone who's got an I3 project experience, it'd be good to hear from you. You see the budgets there. And then we have the new call, what we call the Regional Innovation Valley. And that's part of the Pillar 3 of Horizon Europe. And its heading is the European Innovation Ecosystems. So you've got two calls, but they have similar objectives. And interestingly enough, we see that DG Research has now started to integrate the territorial dimension. Pillar 3 of Horizon Europe has this strong ecosystem message. So it's very clear to me, and I think to you on the ground, that the territorial dimension, the word ecosystem is used, is important. And running throughout both programs, we see the relevance and connections with the smart specialization strategies, which, as you know, are strongly aligned with the structural fund programs that you have all put in place in your regional and national. So some nice connections and a cohesion dimension I think we'll come back to. Next slide. There is also another process in place called the expression of interest, where individual regions can say, yes, we're interested in being part of this community. And that has to be done regardless of whether you're going to go for one of these calls. And if you're definitely going to go for the calls, you definitely have to register in this expression of interest. So check that out. So the philosophy in going forward, you can see that the timeline here. The first message to share with you is this notion on regional innovation values of being part of what they call co-fund program. So it ensures 50% funding from the DG research, but that means you need to find the 50% missing. So if we look at the expected size of budgets they contribute, 8 to 12 million, you double that to get the impression of the size of the projects that you need to be designing. So 16 to 24 million. These are quite large scale projects, you know, Interreg projects are large, but this is even bigger. They want to fund roughly 6 partnerships. So that gives you an idea of the scale of the initiative. And the projects themselves are expected to last between 3 to 5 years. But the first message here is co-fund. You know, where would we find the extra 50%? Next. Those who are familiar with Horizon Europe know that you often just need 3 partners to launch your consortium. Here, you need at least 5. So that's the first you know, insight and you know, knowledge to share. We also have a matrix that needs to reflect the innovation status of your region. And on next slides, you'll see later, we have the different criteria. Sorry, Eugene, if you can go back. We have the different criteria for identifying moderate or emerging innovative regions and one strong or innovation leader region. So your consortium has to conform to some strict criteria in terms of the partners that you bring together. Next. The target group, the key priority is for national regional innovation authorities, and they will have to be signing letters of intent to demonstrate how the 50% are looking to be co-funded. There was a slight error in the initial draft program where they referred to different organizations as associated partners, which is misleading in Horizon Europe. But we can confirm that research institutions, universities, companies, clusters, innovation intermediaries, quite a long list, are also beneficiaries of the program and will benefit from the 50% co-funding, but somebody else will have to come up with the match. Associated partners in Horizon Europe terms, probably not very relevant for this call, but it's the countries such as Switzerland, Israel, etc. But it's probably not relevant. Next slide. So in terms of the main focus, we've seen it's the national, regional, local innovation program owners. We also have to bear in mind that the process by which this project is developed and delivered will be through annual action plans. So you've got to consider this as being a program in which you are delivering a work program, and you will see later that you are delivering actions through open calls for supporting innovation challenges of the SMEs within your chosen thematic area. Next slide. When we think about action plans, you need to first of all consider why your project, why your thematic area would be of value for the European Union. So you've got to consider how your approach will be scalable, have strong EU added value, and therefore relevant to other regions. That's always important. The focus on a thematic or technological area and I'll share those with you in a moment, that can bring together your community. The focus, I think, in many Interreg Europe projects is clearly relevant to these. We have a number of sector-based projects. You can look at some of our policy briefs on Industry 4.0. You can look at the ones on smart specialization that Laura mentioned. The other dimension, as in any call, you're all familiar with answering European Interreg Europe projects. So here we have to look at what the priorities are within the EIE, the European Innovation Ecosystems. Important messages also about inclusiveness, diversity, implementation of private actors, which is quite different from Interreg Europe. And this is one of the new mantras we see across the Horizon Europe programs, the complementarity and synergies, and obviously with cohesion funding will be important. The notion of the long-term commitment is important because this is how your funding, 50% co-funding, will be demonstrated when you submit your bids. Next. For those who are familiar with Horizon Europe, you know the term on the left-hand side, coordination support actions, and on the right we have something more closer to the market called innovation action. So within the regional innovation value, you have the two types of activities. So on the left, you have the typical, let's say, strategic construction, partnership building, looking at the broader issues that enable you to develop your joint action plan. This is about preparing what we call in this program the joint calls. So on the right-hand side, you've got the opportunity, many different terms, cascade funding, financial support for third party, but basically pot of money, part of the money you'll be given has to be shared through open calls for major investment initiatives supported by SMEs. Normally, these cascade funding mechanisms are restricted to 60,000 vouchers of 60,000. Those who are familiar with the Eurocluster calls or the InnoSups and other Horizon Europe will be familiar with that financial level. In this case, we have opportunities to support SMEs with a grant of up to 600,000. So it's a huge difference. So it gives you an idea of the scale of the investment projects that are being expected. High TRL, technology readiness level, so 6 to 8 as you're getting close to market, given that 9 is the highest figure. And in terms of what thematic areas will they be looking to get support from, your bid should focus on one of the 5 issues you see on the right-hand side. So reliance on fossil fuels, the whole decarbonation agenda, food security, and I can think of the project String in our Interreg community, and we have a whole portfolio linked to a green transition, digital transition, cybersecurity. We have a number of projects in Interreg Europe who deal with this. Healthcare, again, I think of Titan, I can think of Ithaca, a lot of experience, and then circularity. During the info days, partners asked whether we should combine the different thematics. It's possible, but people said it's probably best to stick to one. Next slide, sorry. So co-funding, how do you do this? Well, the obvious question, and it's already been put on this FAQ, is can we use cohesion funding to match the 50%? The answer is yes, but please check the rules. So I can't say anything more. I think everybody is optimistic that this can be a possibility, but public innovation research funding from national and other regional sources are relevant. Private sources in terms of the companies that will be engaged in the co-funding action through open calls. So it is one of the key questions you need to ask yourself when you're putting together your proposal. Next slide. So key points. 50% co-funding, there's not much time left to secure that given the summer holidays and the cycle of meetings at your regional councils, etc. Have a look at the FAQ on the match fundings from ERDF and other sources. Pay attention to the consortium construction, get the right people round the table. We always suggest that you have at least one backup for the more critical partners in case something would be looking delicate or dangerous in terms of their participation. We see that the broad openness of the call for open innovation actors across the ecosystem, clusters, research innovations. Action plans are there to drive the open call process, so you've got to be clear on what you want to deliver as a consortium. We've already had some European innovation ecosystem projects, so maybe you can look at them to see what type of partners have been engaged, and they've been running for at least 2 years now. And if you've got specific questions, we put the link there for the official guidance, and they get replied through the FAQ. There are some quick points I'd like to just share on the next slides on the I3. Just the main differences, because as I said, the I3 has been running for a number of years now. 2 important messages. The Cascade funding is now at 100%, so you no longer have to find the co-funding. The co-funding on this program is not 70%, it's not 50%, but it's 70%. But for the Cascade funding, where you give grants to the SMEs, then that is funded at 100%. In this case, the grants are limited to vouchers of 60,000. Linkages to the S3 community, and then particularly thinking of the community of practice. It's been recently relaunched by DG Regio. Some simplification on the support letters, but you can look at that in detail. Again, the same info day slides are available. Next slide. The new European Innovation Agenda is relevant to both calls, and you can see how these are the 5 thematic areas identified in the Regional Innovation Valley and also in the I3. We call them the burning challenges. Next. In terms of eligible activities within an I3, if you look at the bottom left corner, we can see very much the focus on delivering and enhancing products and services, getting them closer to the markets through testbed or prototyping activities. In terms of the innovative ideas and products, bear in mind they have to be significantly state-of-the-art, new to Europe, new to the sector. This isn't about funding business as usual activities. This is about taking things forward to make a real difference to the value chain that you will have identified as your investment priority. Validation and testing in the real environment, which is interesting, where you can engage with end users, buyers, to help SMEs get their first clients and access to market. We'll take all the questions later on in the moderated session, but there is a budget for that. Interregional dimension, I think that's relevant to all of you. You can see it covers all the main people that we will see in a typical Interreg Europe project, and the notion of the smart specialization, quadruple helix, I think is all very familiar to you, and we'll hear it from our next speakers. Next slide. So the question that was asked, 70% of the total budget of your project needs to go towards meeting the needs of SMEs. Part of that can be through the FSTP, and I think that's limited to 30%. But SMEs can be, in an I3, can be part of the consortia. So it gives them access to the co-funded level of 70% of the program. Lots of numbers, it's not always easy to get them, but I recommend you look at the call, you'll get much clearer. We've talked about the TRL levels, and I think the last point, evidence-based territorial impact, very relevant for you in your Interreg Europe experiences. One lesson from the previous discussions we've had on I3 is when you are presenting your value chain, whether it's textiles, whether it's automotive, one of the challenges I think you need to convince the evaluator is, how will your project not only generate sort of an interregional and European value chain, but how, by working together, you will remove identified bottlenecks or challenges that are being faced by this sector. And in that way, you can then justify the type of projects that you will fund, because they're going to have a direct impact on supporting removing a bottleneck or a challenge within that value chain. So it's, you know, it's a quite the philosophical approach behind what I3 is trying to deliver. Next. Key points to remind you, the Cascade funding is now at 100%. Previous projects were at 70%. We think by looking at some of your Interreg portfolio and policy briefs we've mentioned, really good. The community of practice, some of you were previously involved in the S3 industry partnerships. I think there'll be a lot of those have looked at the I3. SMEs can be partners in the project. So working with clusters, for example, can enable you to get quick access to the SMEs with investment-ready projects. And again, the slides are available on the same link as the other ones. Next, the annexes, I will just show you them, but I'm not going to present them. If you just click on, basically, we took a summary of the different elements, a comparative format between the I3 and the co-funding. So I'm not going to present them, but click to the next slide. You just get a feel for, you can see the different countries and the funding rates here. And all the useful links for getting access to the call documents and, more importantly, staying up to date with the FAQs. So thank you very much. We'll answer your questions in the moderated session after our next two panelists. So don't hesitate to put them in the discussion, and then we'll give us a chance to answer them. Laura, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I'll see you later in the moderated panel discussion. So I'm happy to leave the floor to Rafał Mużakowski from Mazowieckie Województwo, Poland. I'm sorry for the pronunciation of your region name. He will present some insights from the Interreg Europe Cohesion Project and the CESAMAT good practice. So please, Rafał, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. How Laura said, the topic of my presentation is some insight from our cohesion project, and it will be the territorial mapping initiative and CESAMAT good practice. And if we speak about territorial mapping initiative, it was one of the core instruments for intra and inter-regional learning developed in cohesion project. It was diagnosis exercise aimed at identifying areas of improvement for alignment of S3 strategy at all territorial levels in each of the regions. And each of the partner regions has developed all STM following a common methodology and applied through a participative approach in consultation with partner regions. And all partners in the project did all smart territorial mapping, and it was the first and second semester when we work with this smart territorial mapping. And after that, the smart territorial mapping was also a part of regional action plans. It was very important action in cohesion project generally. Please, next slide. During the process of territorial mapping initiative, we used this kind of matrix, which you can see now, and we have to fill it with all information from our region. And after, when we did it, we see how it looks situation in our region generally. Please, next slide. And as a result of the development of the intelligent territorial map, gaps were identified in the process of multi-level management of RIS Mazovia strategy. And it was the necessity to strengthen cooperation with representatives of local government the needs to link the objective of RIS3 Mazovia more closely with the strategies of local government units, joining new entities to process of multi-level management of RIS3 Mazovia, and strengthening clustering in Mazovia and closer cooperation with clusters. And when we made identification of the gaps, we did some action. And the first action was the expansion of the composition of the Mazovia Innovation Council by introducing representatives of the cities representing all subregions, not three of the voivodeship. It was cities like Ciechanów, Ostrołęka, Płock, Radom, Sierce, Warsaw, Żyrardów, Wołomin, Piaseczno. Second action, it was better promotion of the objective of RIS3 Mazovia among other local government units, but also the territorial instruments addressed to the individual subregions take into account the implementation of these objectives. We also made decision to include representatives of local government units at the local level who will be involved in work of our smart specialization working groups. And the last action, it was cluster representatives will be included in working groups for smart specialization area. And generally, after all this identification of these gaps on the stage of all projects, the leader of the project made this publication about smart territorial mapping for enhanced multi-level governance of RIS3, inputs for interregional learning, and it consists all partners' experience with this territorial mapping initiative. And if anybody is interested, I can send this publication, and you can to know it generally. Okay, next slide, please. And during when in cohesion project we had some good practice, and one of them was CESAMAT. CESAMAT is the Center for Advanced Materials and Technologies, and it is one of the largest investment in research and development in Poland. The CESAMAT project is implemented by a consortium consisting of 9 research centers, and for example, it is Warsaw University, some units from Polish Academy of Science, University of Warsaw, and Military University of Technology. The research and the scientific units make all 5 highly specialized laboratories equipped with state-of-the-art apparatus available. And this investment became a scientific multidisciplinary space for carrying out business-oriented research in the following platforms: modeling and simulation, technology of structures, diagnostic and characteristics of material structure, device and circuits, development of new materials, development of fluid microsystems, bioengineering, printed electronics. And the cooperation is carried out at the various levels, from local, between the universities, students and readers, entrepreneurs, to national, between the universities and institutes of Polish Academy of Sciences. And the CESAMAT activities are implemented in our area of RIS Mazovia as modern business services. Okay, next slide, please. And since CESAMAT start working, there are some evidence of success of CESAMAT, because the CESAMAT is innovation ecosystem moderator as digital innovation hub, a living lab of creating and testing new ideas. They have 44 companies have used research and development infrastructure, 150 complete research projects, 42 international projects implemented, 29 new jobs created, 30 new research posts created, 55 auxiliary and technical staff employed to operate research and development, 91 scientific entities and 312 scientists benefited from research and development, and 450 students use the research and development. And this data isn't the newest generally, and I think that all these figures will be high at this moment. And generally, the CESAMAT is a good example of multidisciplinary units of cooperation between multi-level different entities. Okay, next slide, please. And it was my short insight from the Cohesion project. And thank you. And if you will be any question, I can answer in moderate part. And of course, if anybody is interested in this publication, I can send it too.
Excellent. Thank you, Raphael. We'll come back to some of the more generic questions in the moderated session. I've got two questions for you. The first one is, it was interesting that you made the sort of governance dimension evolve during this project, and I saw the cluster dimension. Can you give us insights into the number of clusters that perhaps were engaged in your process and that are now part of the S3 in your region?
I don't remember the figure now, honestly saying, but I can check it maybe.
Well, it's not important for now, but it's the question. My main question is, when I look at the CESAMAT good practice and the organization, I mean, that in my mind seems very much aligned with the type of partner that would sit in a regional innovation valley or an I3 project. But the question is, to what extent have you been able to connect your S3 priorities with the research priorities? Is there a good fit in terms of the projects that come forward, that they find sufficient resources in the CESAMAT to make sure they're aligned with your smart specialization priorities?
Generally, we have this area in our RIS3 Mazovia, modern business services, and the CESAMAT fit in this idea of this modern business services.
Okay.
And it is
questions. Are there any technological priorities that this is a network? Are there any technological priorities that in particular you showcase in the Mazovia region?
Generally, the CESAMAT is high-tech entities.
Mm-hmm.
And they made a lot of work. They made a lot of projects, but at this moment I can't say an example because generally when I wasn't working on all cohesion project,
mm-hmm.
I was part of the end of this project. And I don't have experience when we made this territorial mapping and when we choose the good practice from this project. And and I don't have time to go inside of this project very deeply. But if you
maybe in the documentation you can share. I don't
know. But of course I can maybe I can answer any question after the meeting by email or even I can send any documentation. Okay. Because
if there's a link to the document, you can put it in the chat, and like that we can then share it or put it in part of the learning pack that we'll distribute after this meeting. So if you can share that, that'd be great. Okay. Thanks, Raphael. Laura, I think we can move to our next speaker, Albert.
Yeah, so thank you, Rafael, for sharing your experience with improvement of territorial innovation policies and also presenting some interesting example of regional investments. Now I'm happy to leave the floor to our second guest speaker. So Albert Aan from Anse University of Science, Groningen, the Netherlands. He will present some insights from Track S3 Interreg Europe project, and he will give us some recommendations. Thank you, Albert, sorry. The floor is yours, and thank you. So your name is misspelled. Sorry, the name is not correct. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Laura, and good morning to you all. I'm happy to present some findings and also some recommendations from the Track 3 project. And what I did was also trying to have already a kind of a look with our comments on the Regional Innovation Valley call, so that I a bit focused on it. Of course, you can find all the information about the project and all the partners of the project on the Interreg Europe website, and also the good practices and action plans, etc., etc., etc. So that's for the project. Next slide, please. When it comes to the core findings, of course, I think it will not surprise you that we found a lot of good practices, especially when it comes to the innovation structures that are really servicing the regional innovation ecosystems. And we found a broad consensus in many regions that innovation infrastructures are a key element in ecosystems. So that's quite an conclusion, I think, and it's an important conclusion, saying something about the importance and the use of innovation infrastructures. When it comes to being more or less successful, we found that if you look at the characteristics of these structures, then those who are built on real demand, bottom-up, Q4 created, near to market, involving SMEs, they are the most effective. And they are near to market, near to investments, etc., etc. But we have seen also a lot of, let's say, weak points of existing infrastructures. And to mention the most important things that we have seen is well, the underperformance. It's quite a thing because a lot of money is put in it, and then if you see underperformance, it's not that good, of course, and many times related to real weak exploitation, and also related then to management, and sometimes it's thought of being not that difficult, but you really need good management for these kind of environments. And sometimes we see, well, researchers growing into this kind of institutes or infrastructures, and then you really need management, people who know about finance, marketing, communications, and so on and so on. Which is brings me to the next point is the strong under-representations of SMEs utilizing these infrastructures. We've seen this in many cases, so that's a real weak point. The next one is instability because of financial situations. Most of the infrastructure is handled as a project of 3 years, for example, and then, well, it's left open how they should go on after the project period. And also an important finding, also with relation to the Regional Innovation Valley, is that we found we could not see almost no interregional collaboration going on between innovation infrastructures. So next slide, please. That leads us also to a kind of recommendations. Okay, if you have these kind of findings, what would be things to do? And of course, in the project, we came up with regional action plans, which some are even still running. But on the top of the list, there is SME involvement. This is so important also for the effect and for the real output in the region. You need to have this SME involvement and people who are governing these kind of infrastructures or are handling calls. They should be much more keen on it. And this point followed by the improvement of management, business plans, etc. This is also a very important issue. And through this all, of course, a better exploitation of these kind of infrastructures. Then going to the point of interregional collaboration, it's clear that in almost all cases, a vision on interregional collaboration is missing. It's not in the business plans. It's also not in the project proposals. It's also not in the call texts. So we are also from a level of policymakers, we are not asking for it. And sometimes it's even hindered by the opinion that the invested money, in many cases it's ERDF, it's money for the region and not for common use in the EU. And there are other more protectionistic opinions also hindering interregional collaboration built on the use of infrastructure. But then also there is a lot of low-hanging fruit on many issues. So when it comes to international operations, look, we have found that almost all information about the availability of infrastructure, sometimes it's not even known in the region, and so it's also not known internationally. Many documentations are in a local language. That's logic. But then if you want to open for international collaboration, then of course language is already an important issue. So there is a lot of low-hanging fruit connected to that also. But the main issue, and that's not a low-hanging fruit, that's this point of missing a real vision on interregional collaboration. And last but not least, it's very, very important to get more stability in finance and governance. Working on innovation asks for a long-term policy and long-term financing. So that brings me to the last slide. Thank you. And in fact, there we can mainstream our findings on regional innovation ecosystems with the findings of the European Strategy Forum on research infrastructures. Of course, research infrastructures are another cup of tea. But then when it comes to long-term sustainability, then you can see that we can almost mainstream our findings with that of the forum. And when it comes to having a vision, there, of course, you need the political will from the region to open up for Europe. And especially when it comes to a relation with the cohesion policy, that's quite an issue. Because in regional policy, and when you look at the regional innovation valleys, there is the possibility to use ERDF as co-funding. But that's a real regional political thing. And then looking at the cohesion part, then there has to be a will to work together with other regions who are less developed or medium developed. Everybody wants to play in the top league, but in Europe, then looking at cohesion, we have to work together with these other regions also. And that's quite an issue. So that's first point. The second point is that we should move away from a project approach and much more to a program strategy, which will give much more stability. And last but not least, also, it's not only on strategy, but also on financing, moving away from just project financing, but thinking of program financing to really give stability to further developments. So these are our main findings, Laura, and I would like to end my presentation here. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Albert. It was really interesting to see the connection from the findings of the project to your recommendations. And I think that, Mark, you have a lot of material to support your moderated panel discussion. So I leave you the floor. Thank you.
Don't leave me altogether. But,
well, if you want, I can start with the question to you.
No, I've got, there's some 3 questions in the, that I asked Eugenie to put forward. I mean, firstly, you know, we are trying to deal with 2 calls, the Regional Innovation Valley and the I3. So there is some overlap in the philosophy. And I think Albert in his presentation highlighted some of the key messages that we'll come back to shortly. But sometimes in the detail, I went very quickly. So, you know, NUTS 3 regions, I think you saw from the, I think the possibilities for engaging with a cross-section of stakeholders means that there's nobody really excluded from the bidding process for either of them. You know, the challenge is if you're in a regional innovation valley, then the co-funding dimension is very important. So there's that political will. In the I3s, the co-funding is less important, and it's just the lead region that needs to provide the indication that the 70-30% split. So there's 2 different funding models that you need to bear in mind, but yeah, I think NUTS 3, you know, can lead. The ideal percentage of an FST budget, they are specified in both calls, and it's, you know, you need to check that. Within the I3, it is specified that of your total budget, 70% needs to go towards SMEs. And so it's SMEs within the consortium, so they are partners, and then also through FSTP. So in an I3, within that 70%, no more than 30% can go through the open voucher call. So in an I3, you have that relationship. In the regional innovation valleys, it's slightly different, but the same principles apply. There is a volume that's set for overall SME focus, and then the volume that goes into the FSTP, i.e. the open vouchers. And I remind you, in the regional innovation valleys, with 600,000 being the top value, it's quite a significant part of your budget. The 50%, the third question, the 50% co-fund is relevant to the regional innovation valley. And so this question mixes 2 elements. So regional innovation valley is the co-fund at 50%. The FSTP elements of the I3, those vouchers are funded at 100%. So I think the person who asked this question mixed the 2 calls up. So hopefully clarified that. So I3 FSTP vouchers are funded 100%. And in the regional innovation, the co-fund, you're on a 50-50 basis. But so that's where, when we saw what type of co-funding needs to be provided, it can come from public, private, and other sources. So that is one of the real challenges for the regional innovation valley. You know, we shouldn't hide from that. So thank you, Eugenie, for putting those questions. And if anyone else has got a question, you can use the discussion or the Q&R in your on your screen at the bottom. So if come back now to Albert and Rafael and Laura as well, I think there are a couple of messages I think both of you mentioned in different ways. But I think that the first point perhaps could check with you is both of you identified in your projects the engagement with the SMEs, whether it's services or as in the actors that can shape the demand. And I think, Albert, you said it, you know, sometimes is insufficient, but demand is not sufficiently represented in the project. And question to you, from your project experience, how can we improve the engagement with SMEs, in particular with these calls that are coming up, which require them to put on the table their investment projects? Because, you know, if they want to get co-funding, the consortia has to identify the right projects that bring forward, you know, the type of investment that fits within the regional innovation valley or the I3. So any thoughts on how we can engage SMEs on their investment projects, as opposed to them buying services from you know, a technology platform or a research center?
Well, when you look at our experience from track 3, then what I already said, that when you look at the successful use of infrastructure, and mostly it's connected also to other strong developments in the region. For example, if you have a strong water testing center, and then it's strong in a way they also are related to SMEs. You can see that many times there is a cluster around it, etc., etc. And when I look forward at the regional innovation valley core, I think regions would be they maybe also automatically will use these strong cores in the regions to connect within the core. So if you have to start with a completely new setup of organizations and combined companies, then it's quite a thing to do, because you have to show some proof of evidence, as you mentioned also, Mark, within the application. So I think, and it also makes reasons because of many other factors that regions would come up with their strong developed setups.
Yeah, I think the message is don't start from scratch. You know, I mean, we've got the Interreg Europe projects. As I said earlier, many of them are, you know, closely aligned with the thematic priorities. We saw, you know, green, circular transition, decarbonisation. We saw healthcare, and so, you know, and Albert, you mentioned the water sector, which is quite strong in,
for example, yes,
North Holland, which fits in with the circular economy. And so you're building on those SMEs that are already perhaps, you know, more aligned with you know, close to market investment and cooperation projects. Okay. Rafael, do you have any insights from, you know, how the Polish SMEs can be
generally we have some experience with cooperation with SMEs, especially in our working groups, but some SMEs are very willing to cooperate with us, others not exactly, and sometimes when we look at for new SMEs to make new cooperation, it is very hard, because for example, if I send invitation to 100 SMEs, and if you one or two answer, it is very good score generally. But earlier it was easier, because when we working with SMEs in our working group, and we working on our documentation for regional program, they very interested in, because they have some influence on subject of our regional operation program generally, and it was connected with funding and the competition about funding generally. But now when the rules little change, and they don't, and we don't have this dotation for SMEs, they are a little interested in working with us generally.
And I think one of the challenges that SMEs will have in these projects is that we're asking them to go even a step further from working within the regional ecosystem. We're asking them to participate in a European value chain. So I think in selecting your investment projects, they need to have this, you know, broader perspective on, you know, the value of interregional cooperation. Do you know if any of your SMEs have had those type of experiences? You know, for example, accessing a technology resource in another region outside of your own, even?
I think that we have some kind of, but I'm not sure that they are still SMEs generally, because they
bigger.
develop and when they see that it's good for them, they reach for many sources for funding, and they very quickly developed generally.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have some experience with companies, as I already mentioned, the water sector, but also in the energy sector, which is also a very strongly developed cluster in the northern Netherlands. But then, of course, what's also a kind of, maybe I feel free to add this, Mark, that if you look at companies and their investments, it's always very difficult to model them into let's say the rhythm of a call. So now we are asking them to enter, but if they are at the moment ready for investments, or maybe they put their money somewhere else, so it's a kind of coincidence, in fact. So this call comes, and then you have to take them on board, so that there's a kind of coincidence in it. And then I feel a lot of, I mentioned it also in our presentation, there's quite a lot of tension between, as well on political level as also on company level, when it comes to, let's say, cohesion thinking behind it. Because companies, of course, with their investments go their way, and then it's more the value chain logic in it, partner logic and market logic. And then we ask them also to have to be prepared to also work in the cohesion logic. So meaning, okay, when you are doing business with, for an example, from the Northern Netherlands, with Germany or Sweden or whatever, and then we ask them, okay, well, we are going, we should have Romania or Hungary or Poland or whatever on board, and they are not there with their business. But still, from a regional perspective, it could be a very good thing to do. But from a business perspective, then there are other rules. So there's a real tension within this.
I agree with Albert, because generally the market and economy act quicker than this all political decision and political plans. And when we made our policy, we have to look it in the future and make some what market can do generally. And I think it is very hard to recognize what market do in the future.
I think if we look back to the sort of the genesis of the I3 and now the Regional Innovation Valley, I think we have two themes. One is that we've been encouraged in the regions to do a lot of strategy development, sector prioritization, and to make it more relevant to businesses, we've introduced this Cascade funding model. So that's a sort of simple, here's a voucher to go and work with another SME, work with another technology center to improve your product. And now we're seeing with the scale up of the Regional Innovation Valley, we're trying to create much more critical mass with vouchers of up to 600,000. So co-funding, enabling a company to say, well, I can now put together a project worth 1.2 million. So this is, I suppose, the incentive for participating in a European brackets cohesion-driven innovation/investment project. So the scale up is quite an interesting concept. One of the other, I think, initiatives you both mentioned in different ways is the theme of governance. Raphael, you talked to how your mapping and lessons learned from other partners enabled you to sort of strengthen the type of actors, the type of partners that were part of your governance. And Albert, you put your finger on one of the key, challenges for both I3 and RIV was the vision and the governance necessary to say, okay, we're going to not only say yes to this call, we're going to say yes to work with these partners for the next 3 to 5 years. If you're sitting in listening to us, and there are 45 people doing it, so thank you for doing that. What message could, I always like to say you're stuck in the lift with the leader of your council, your regional government, your municipality, your nuts 1, 2, 3. what can you say to them to say this is a good use of our time and resources to join in this action plan and create a regular deal flow of projects, because the innovation valleys will have at least three calls, so it's a long-term commitment. What messages do you think you can say? Well, in Interreg Europe, we did all this work. We didn't have the money to invest. Now this brings. Maybe I'm giving you one of the answers, but what do you do? You're in the lift, Rafael, Albert.
I hope it's a slow lift, Mark.
Yeah, only 4,700 slides to get through. Yeah.
Yes. Well, what I hope and what I would try to convince them on is, because the title of this project is Regional Innovation Valleys, and for me it sounds as a possibility, a real possibility, to go to really regional cooperation. And looking at other regions, the possibilities there, and taking your businesses from your region on board and go into long-term actions with other regions in Europe. Because it was also in my presentation, until now, a lot of things are just project-based, and it would be a fantastic thing to go from project to program thinking, also on a regional level, also within regional policy, and looking for our regional policies, also looking around in Europe and making a kind of idea, having a vision on how from our own region we would like to work together with other regions in Europe, and not only for 3 years, but for long-term cooperation. And then, of course, it needs a lot of analysis and discussion with all departments in the region. In fact, we already started within the Northern Netherlands. We had a first couple of meetings discussing this regional innovation valley. Should it be on Northern Netherlands level? Should it be on province level? Should it be thematic like water or energy? And then with whom to work together with? But it's I can say to you that's a very difficult discussion until now, because it's next level, and in fact everybody has to be prepared to go to this next level, and that also with this politician in the lift, I would like to urge him to go to next level European collaboration.
Yeah, so if it's a slow lift, or you press the button that says stop. Rafael, whether you're in the lift or in the meeting, what are the discussions that you think we need to have with the political budget holders?
Generally, Mazovia is on moderate stage if you think about innovation, and we want to improve. And we can improve by working with regions who are more developed than we. And the second part, we have some value to bring in this cooperation also. And I think it is good for all partners to working together, make some new experience, find new examples, and give some examples for others generally. And working in, for example, regional innovation value is the best way to develop generally.
No, I see from that position in Mazovia, you have quite a strong motivation to either participate, and then because of your need for moving up the different innovation levels and accessing that knowledge, and Albert and his different perspective is saying, well, where do we see the benefits? And they need to come quite quickly, I think, in business terms, to show opening market, accessing different technology. Europe is committed to not reinventing and reinvesting in the same, biotechnology plants, nano plants. That's why we have these European level infrastructure. So I think there are points, but I think both of you highlighted interesting things. I would also urge, people listening to us, is there are existing partnerships, and the focus is looking at some of the existing relationships you've created in your Interreg projects. You've got some long-standing partnerships, in different projects. Other networks like Vanguard, I know a number of you online here are part of Vanguard, which has pilot actions that are well aligned, looking at the different priorities, the sectors. I can know there's a smart health network. There's a one on advanced printing, 3D printing. So there's these communities that maybe can help. Within the Interreg Europe, if we look at, there's been a water project. I'm sure, Albert, you know of a water IMAP. So you've got communities already in sports and health. The projects. We've got one on string on agriculture and on agri-food circularity and sovereignty. So I think within Interreg Europe, we have a number of sector-based, value chain-based initiatives that I think you can all capitalize on. So I think that's a point that particularly Rafa just mentioned. There's a question from Stephen. He says, Mark has talked about innovation valleys at I3 as two separate calls. They're part of the same family of regional innovation valleys. So that's the umbrella initiatives. But there is a call that comes, the I3 is funded from the DG Regio pot of money, and the regional innovation call, which we sometimes call the co-fund part, is funded by DG Research. So Horizon is linked to the more the co-fund, and the I3 is linked to more the cohesion history. And the strand 1 and 2 are both linked to the I3 program. But as I said, we chose a selection of slides. The first one tries to separate the two families, but saying you're under the banner of regional innovation valleys, but it's also a banner that's used to describe the core that is within the European innovation ecosystem, which is strand 3 or pillar 3, I beg your pardon, pillar 3 of Horizon Europe. So there's lots of jargon, lots of terms to connect. Also, I'd like to follow up Stavros from our friends from Central Macedonia. You kindly answered the question that we put, saying you're already involved in an I3 in a 2A, and you've submitted a 2B. 2B is a capacity building dimension. If you could put in the chat which sector you're in for the 2A, because that's currently ongoing, and any other points that you think would be interesting for the audience for lessons learned on maybe constructing the consortia that you maybe can share. So 2A, biotech for food. So clearly with one of the priorities, and you're a fan of the circular economy for your 2B. Thank you, Stavros, for those insights. The other key messages, and I think you touched upon it, Albert, is the need for a long-term commitment. This isn't even a one-off project. It's about creating I like the word from project to program. And if we look at the regional innovation call, the notion within the Horizon focus is about creating annual action plans. So you've got to create some community. Within our Interreg Europe projects, we produce an action plan, or we used to produce action plans. Are there any lessons from the action plan production process that you think might be relevant to share? I don't know, Raphael or Albert, if you were involved in action plan production in your two projects.
Yes, I have been. And when you look at the Tracks project, just to mention 2 or 3 good examples, like we work together with the University of Bremen and with the state of Bremen, and then they emphasize the very big importance of monitoring, showing what you're doing, giving proof of evidence, etc., etc. And they had a very strong action plan on it, in fact. And when it comes to communication and opening up possibilities of infrastructure, the province of West Flanders, they launched an action plan to work on that. So if you have a good analysis of okay, what are the flaws in the policies or in the actions, then you can have quite strong action plans. And then just to add to that, I'm very happy with the new setup of the Interreg Europe program, in which action plans are already produced during the first period of the program, or even they are sometimes you can skip them nowadays and going for real policy improvements. So it's not the last phase of the project, but in fact it's the core of the project, coming to improvements or to action plans if needed. And then you have much more control of it because it's in the heart of the project. And then thinking about regional innovation values and having an action plan every year, building on the last action plan, I think that's quite a good approach.
I think there are lots of good experiences in action plan production, and you mentioned the notion of indicators, which I'll come back to in the last question. Raffaele, on your action plan experience?
We have of course, some experience with action plan, and for example, in cohesion project, when we implement this action plan, it was very interesting to observe the expansion of the composition of the Mazovia Innovation Council, because we invite new members to this council, and they never before were in this kind of council, and they have had to learn how to act in this council generally. Since when they are a part of this council, we can observe how they learn and how it will be for them in the future very good for them, generally for them. Because we will in cohesion we learn as the region, but we can also see how others in the region learn with us, and it is very interesting. And generally the cohesion project, it was our second Interreg project, and in this year we start four new inter-regional projects as partners. Because we notice very quickly that is very good for the region, and we have to improve our partnership in the regional Interreg program.
Okay. I think that's useful, and the fact you're continuing is a good sign. Last question to the two of you, and it came out from one of the comments I saw in the chat, is the notion of the capacity to monitor. And Albert, you just mentioned your experience there. So creating some robust indicators linked to SME engagement. Have you got any suggestions from other projects, not necessarily Interreg Europe, but where your engagement with SMEs on investment has had an impact that you think could be the type of impacts the evaluators would be looking for in either the I3 or the Regional Innovation Valley?
Yes, well, when you look at the monitoring in our region, we have now, I think, maybe 5, 6, maybe even longer experience with what we call the Innovation Monitor, which has a lot of indicators on board, and which is monitoring a kind of core group of hundreds, maybe at the moment even thousands of companies in the Northern Netherlands who are using innovation money like ERDF, but also other funds. and then quite regular, sometimes once a half year, or in some years it was once a year. There's a lot of data produced by this monitor, and we have a close collaboration with the University of Groningen, with scientists also looking at these data. And they provide us with a lot of information also that we can see the gradual development of companies, because that's in fact also a kind of process. You are bringing them in with innovation money, and it's always difficult to pinpoint with one measure, with one subsidy, okay, how is this company developing? But if you do this over years and have the right looking at the right aspect, you can really show what your money is doing, how companies are developing, and how the innovation capacity of a region in fact is growing. So I would, if you ask me for an advice, I would really advise regions to really invest in good monitoring systems. And when I look at an Interreg Europe project, for example, Passepartout, was also looking not only for monitoring and giving proof of evidence, but also using these data to look at future developments, and also giving them indicators to improve policies and actions. So also when it comes to this kind of using yearly action plans, such a monitoring system not only shows you what you are doing, but also what you could improve.
That's good. Maybe my colleagues can put the link to the Passepartout in the chat for others to learn. That would be good. Thank you, Albert. Rafael, any experience on the indicators and the impact monitoring that you think would be relevant to share?
We have some statistic about how it looks generally, and also we use National Bureau of Statistics to track the situation with SMEs generally. And
I think that enables you to build into the national policy priorities. I think we talked about the burning challenges that the Commission has identified in their new European Innovation Agenda. And I think one of the points I mentioned was the alignment with the policy objectives at the European, national and regional level. So I think in choosing your indicators, you can use some that the national level will recognize, and it might facilitate the funding. So thank you, Laura, for putting the Passepartout link in the chat. I would just like to come towards the conclusions and ask Eugenie to put on the screen again the first slide that we used, because that was, you had it there. You had it. It was there. Now it's gone. Just go through. Just because I think it's important just to get everybody's in the vocabulary. Voila. The word regional innovation valleys, it gets used at the strategic level and also in the call. So it's important that there's no confusion. The notion of Silicon Valley, obviously, it was in everybody's mind whenever we talk about Silicon Valley. We've got other valleys in Europe, but so the notion that the two DGs in work together, the EU cohesion agenda and the research and innovation agenda, come together and are, trying to address this innovation divide. And by connecting what they call regional innovation valleys, they hope to overcome this bottleneck. To connect the regions, there are two programs. So DG Regio is using an instrument that it's already used before, the I3, Interregional Innovation Investments, and you see the calls and the values there. And then in Horizon, we have what's called the European Innovation Ecosystems, which in some documents is also called the Regional Innovation Valleys. And just to confuse you even further, there's an expression of interest that you can, as a region, can sign up and say, we would like to be a Regional Innovation Valley. which is nothing to do with the calls, but it's one of the criteria that you have to submit to if you want to get annual calls. But the philosophy is the two DGs launch their calls on the same day and they close them on the same day, which is helpful on one level and not so helpful on the other if you have to if you decide to write two bids. But this is the sort of the synergies that are being created under this label, Regional Innovation Valleys, and there are two paths to deliver i.e. I3 and the European Innovation Ecosystem. So maybe that by using this slide again, it helps those who weren't able to join us at the very beginning to get some feedback. So thank you, Eugenie. You can just put the smiling faces back on. So we will share the slides. Any last comments from either my colleague Laura, Albert, or Rafael?
Yes, Mark, actually, we talked a lot about Cascade funding or FSTP, and we have some experience in Interreg Europe with innovation vouchers or other initiatives. Can you give some examples to inspire our audience?
Yeah, I mean, Cascade funding has been used in a number of different programs. ENOSUPS, it was Horizon Europe funded and looking at the way clusters could support SMEs. The Euro cluster, in a number of Horizon projects, we have Cascade funding being used to support research and innovation infrastructures. So I think one of the key challenges is in designing the call. You have quite a lot of latitude and flexibility in your project to say, these are the targets we'd like to achieve. These are the organizations we'd like to fund. And these are the types of projects we want to fund. And then you can put your own weighting, points, evaluation, you evaluate, your team evaluate. So you can say, for example, we want to only support projects between at least 2 SMEs and an innovation platform, or just one SME and innovation platform. You can give extra weighting for those who do it interregionally, internationally, cross-sectorially. So I think this Cascade funding is quite a sort of flexible tool. I was at a meeting last week with the Commission where they said, we're seeing very different quality of Cascade funding, and we want to get everybody to the same level. So there is a validation process when you launch your Cascade funding. It has to be validated by the Commission. So I think you can, in preparing your bids and projects, when you write Cascade funding, don't just write Cascade funding, full stop, next paragraph. Describe what you want to achieve, because it's one of the important levers, as we know in the expression carrot and stick. Well, you have a carrot, here's the money, but we'd like you to do this. We'd like you to measure this. We'd like you to deliver this. And so it's the negotiation you can have, and they are proving to be quite attractive mechanisms because they open up an ecosystem through a technology provider, through a Cascade, a cluster, beg your pardon, or another innovation intermediary / broker. So yeah, I'm a great fan of Cascade funding. It gives a bit of freedom to the projects, and the 60,000 is a bit low. The 600,000 scares me a bit, but I'm not going to deliver, so that's someone else's problem. Anyway, thanks for the question, Laura. Albert, is there anything you want to add, or Rafael, to our discussion?
No, the only thing, but that's more a wish that I really hope that this call will bring more a programmatic approach, as I already mentioned. So I hope people are going to use this for a more long-standing cooperation. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good message. Thank you, Albert.
Okay.
Rafael?
Okay. I hope that my presence today was helpful for our meeting generally. Maybe sometimes I hadn't knowledge, but we are here to learn generally too, and I think it is main reason to cooperate in interregional project And
Well,
I can encourage all to do this cooperation.
Well, thank you, Raphael, for those words. No, I think nobody has 100% knowledge of anything they do. So I think you've given us the links to further detail. So thank you both. I will let Laura conclude our session. I think we've had a very good discussion, but ladies' prerogative. Laura.
Yes, okay. Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Albert, and thank you very much, Raphael, for accepting to be speakers to our session. We learned a lot from you, and I think the audience will have some knowledge to put in practice. So I hope the audience would like to engage in this course or be up to our new initiatives from the Interreg Europe Policy Learning Platform. Keep updated, and I hope to see you soon. So thank you very much. And remember to fill in the satisfaction survey. That will be really helpful for us. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Eugenie. Thank you, Mark. Thank you to all of you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Good luck for the 17th of October.